Welcome back to Missing. Today we're speaking about the mysterious disappearance of Bobby Dunbar. Lance, how's it going today?
It's going great today, Tim. Thanks so much for asking. I hope the listeners are doing well. This one's a real mystery. I mean, we started looking into this. We started perusing the fantastic research document that the great Kathleen Studer put together for us, and it unfolds in a way that I didn't see coming. So I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited to get into our personal thoughts on it because I know how we're reacting is pretty much how the listeners are going to be reacting in real time. But Tim, how are you?
Doing great over here. Yeah, this is quite a story. There's some twists in here. It's very psychological, I think you can say. So we're going to get into all that. Very excited to do so. But first, just want to throw it to commercial and remind you to follow us on social media at Missing CSM. We'll be right back. So Bobby Dunbar went missing from Opelousas, Louisiana, August 23rd, 1912. And he was born on May 23rd, 1908. He's a boy, he's white. He was 4 years old at the time of his disappearance, and the description of Bobby and what he was wearing was a straw hat, blue rompers, and no shoes. He has blonde hair, blue eyes, and a mole on his neck and a burn scar on his big toe.
You know, at first glance, when you see that this is a child of 4 years old, that automatically really kind of pulls at the heartstrings there. I mean, it's difficult to talk about missing people, but when you're getting into this range of like 4 years old where they are very helpless, immediately you see that and you're just thinking, okay, I got to sort of prepare myself for the heaviness of this story. Coupled with a straw hat, blue rompers, no shoes. I mean, doesn't that just paint like Norman Rockwell in your head that this kid is going out fishing and he's like snatched along the way? Just this innocent child who's got his little romper on and no shoes and just going out to have fun with the day. So that's how it started in my head. But that's not how it turned out. And we'll get into that. Bobby Dunbar was the oldest child of Clarence Percy and Leela, she goes by Leslie Dunbar. So Clarence was known as C.P. Dunbar. He was a prominent member of Opelousas, Louisiana, in the early 1900s. He was born and raised there, son of a wealthy farmer named Robert K. Dunbar. So we've introduced the wealth of the family into the story now.
Right. And the Dunbars had come to Louisiana from Scotland via North Carolina in the late 1700s. And as of the 1900 census, Percy was 25, still living with his parents, and wasn't taking over the family business. In fact, his occupation was listed as a real estate agent. And by 1907, he met and married Layla Whitley. And Bobby would come along just under a year later, and their second son, John Alonzo, would join the family in 1910.
All right, so a little bit on Opelousas here. In 1900, it was a small agricultural town just to the west of the Mississippi River Delta. The 1910 U.S. Census lists the population as 4,623 people, and as of today, that population is just over 15,000. So still a very small community. And now it's known for one of the largest massacres during Reconstruction.
Yeah, what a story from history, from 1868, actually. One of the bloodiest massacres of the Revolution era took place in Opelousas, and at least 200 people were killed. Really crazy story, very tragic, and a rabbit hole for another day, maybe on this show or Crawlspace, though, Lance.
Oh, definitely. And I'm going to put it out there. If any one of the listeners knows about this, or if they know anybody who's a historian who might be interested in coming on to talk about it, this is a really pivotal point in American history, I'm going to say, especially in the South.
And Opelousas also received at least 3 trains of orphan children in the early 1900s from New York City in an effort to resettle Catholic orphan children. And with its history of French, Spanish, Canadian, and French West Indian ancestry, Opelousas was the heart of a traditionally Catholic region at that time.
Without getting too deep into religion and personal feelings on religion, it's just always so remarkable to me to hear stories where decisions like this were made. Three trains of orphans arrived there so that they could resettle Catholic orphan children. And how just religion is the basis on that they had to resettle them. It's really, really fascinating to me.
So let's go to the day of Bobby's disappearance. That's August 23rd, 1912. And keep in mind that news reporting in the early 1900s was filled with splashy, sensationalist headlines and stories, so it's very difficult to ascertain facts and details accurately by relying on those articles alone. So on August 23rd, 1912, the Dunbar family were about 25 miles east of Opelousas at Swayze Lake, which was much more of a long, winding swamp than a lake.
And that splashy, sensationalist headline, there's a word for that, and it's one of my favorite words. It's called muckraking. That was big in the 1890s to the 1920s, and it was the really early form of investigative journalism, really. So when we think about Woodward and Bernstein, that's a product of muckraking, where they get into the political system and they try to uncover corruption. They try to uncover anything that's not like ethically beneficial to the public. But along with the responsible journalism at the time, also part of muckraking was the fact that you can just start to put anything out there, and the more sensationalized you could make it, the more that they sold. So it did come with its downside.
So August 23rd was a Friday, and the family was there fishing, and Bobby, again, was 4 years old, and his brother had turned 2 in June, and sometime that day, Bobby went missing. And there really isn't much detail on how he went missing, but searches were done, and by the railroad trestle, some small footprints were found in the mud. Could have been Bobby's, not confirmed, but Bobby was not found.
And the Dunbar family was frantic, according to reports, and they immediately put up a $1,000 reward. In case you're wondering, that's $33,140.72 if you adjust it for today. And this was for information on Bobby.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's not a real high criteria, right, to collect
I know
some of that reward. Yeah. But it doesn't seem like too many people attempted that. So then 8 months later, and just under 200 miles away from Opelousas, a tinker was working his way through Mississippi with a young boy. And the tinker's name was William Cantwell Walters, and he was from Barnesville, North Carolina. And by this time, the reward for Bobby was $6,000, or almost $200,000 in 2025 dollars.
So it appears that no one immediately collected that original $1,000 reward. And just 8 months later, it was up 6 times. They multiplied it by 6 just 8 months later. So they appear to be serious about getting any information on Bobby's disappearance. I also looked up what a tinkerer was. A tinker.
Yeah, what's that?
Somebody who repairs metal objects like utensils and travels in order to do so. So
cool.
Sort of like a handyman.
So someone spotted this small boy with this tinker, William Cantwell Walters, and someone thought that he resembled Bobby Dunbar. I guess word had traveled to some extent, and people were on the lookout. And Walters was jailed immediately, and the young boy was taken into protective custody.
Okay, so my first thought goes to how we talk about these stories nowadays. With social media, it's very easy to get the word out there very fast. You can get thousands of eyeballs on a missing person pretty quickly. But back then, I'm just blown away that somebody spotted this guy with a small boy, thought that the small boy looked like Bobby Dunbar, and they would know that through newspaper. I guess the only way that they would know that is through newspaper, or they might have known him or seen him, but they had the wherewithal to be like, that looks like the kid who's missing. And then he was jailed. Walters is jailed like pretty quickly. So not sure what the difference is between investigations back then, this one in particular, and what we talk about today, because it takes an act of God to get somebody arrested for a kidnapping nowadays.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're not wrong there. But also, I just want to mention that 8 months had passed, and 8 months in the life of a 4 to 5 year old, they change quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like whoever was looking at, I get probably a newspaper article, had a picture of Bobby Dunbar from probably around a year before or something like that, so.
Yeah, you're right, because they didn't take that picture of Bobby like the day he went missing. That picture of Bobby was from prior. So yeah, it's at least a year if we're talking 8 months here. They didn't do like an age progression on him.
Right. So yeah, so I the image out there of Bobby might have looked a little bit different than what he actually looked like had he been walking around. Okay, so Walters claimed that he had done no wrong and that the boy was Charles Bruce Anderson, who went by Bruce. And this Walters was claiming that Bruce was the son of Julia Anderson, who was a farmhand for the Walters family.
This all sounds like a legitimate story. He claimed the boy was the illegitimate son of Julia and his brother. So this would make Bruce or Bobby his nephew.
And apparently with Julia's permission, Bruce had come to Mississippi to visit his true father, J.P. Walters, who was this guy William Walters' brother. So William brought the boy with him to be with family. So I guess that's why they were out and about that day.
So now the Dunbars are summoned to Mississippi to see if they can identify the boy as their Bobby. And there are news reports out there that the boy, being Bobby or Bruce, the boy immediately shouted mother. So those are the accounts of some news reports. So he apparently shouted mother at the sight of Leslie Dunbar. But there are other people there who noted Leslie seemed unsure that the boy was her son Bobby. So 8 months have passed. This reunion happens. Apparently the boy shouts mother, but Leslie, Bobby's actual mother, does seem a bit unsure in that moment.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that mother it was part of the sensational journalism that we were kind of talking about just a moment before, because if that was the reaction, then we probably wouldn't be talking about the story. Like, there would be no twist, right?
Right.
And there were also contradicting reports on whether the boy recognized his younger brother Alonzo. And the next day, Leslie was allowed to bathe the boy, and afterwards claimed that the moles and scars that she saw did indeed match those of her son Bobby.
So I have a problem, like a little red flag pops up here. The Dunbars were allowed to return home to Opelousas with this child. My red flag came up because I was wondering if she was alone with Bobby or that boy when she was allowed to bathe him and identify the marks on him, the scars, the mole, and say this matches Bobby, because it's just her word at this point.
Yeah, it's a little strange. That is a weird part. I mean, I guess if her son had identifying features on his body, maybe that's a normal thing to do, but it does just seem like there's a lot of trust put in the Dunbars and their word at this point.
Right. Because according to the description, he had a mole on his neck and a burn scar on his big toe. So it's not like you're invading his privacy by just like checking his neck or checking. You don't have to fully undress him and bathe him in order to find those two distinguishing characteristics anyway.
Right. Well, if this wasn't weird enough already, the city of Opelousas held a large parade for the homecoming of Bobby Dunbar, which was in April of 1913, and we've got a picture there. So, the whole town seems to be buying into this.
Bobby looks pretty relaxed in that picture, or the child that is being passed off as Bobby. He's got his arm kind of draped over the open driver's side door of the car, and he's standing on the ground, and he just kind of looks like he's chilling out there. He doesn't look like he's being held or...
Yeah, he looks fine. Yeah, they look excited for the parade.
But of course, this was a photo taken in 1913, so they probably had to hold there for about an hour and a half. So a little tough to identify, like, the mood of this child right there.
Right. So Julia Anderson, who was the mother of Bruce, traveled from North Carolina to contest the decisions people were making about her son. And upon arriving in Opelousas, authorities there presented her with 5 boys. And she was asked to identify her son from all of the boys. Another bizarre experiment or something from the past here, Lance. And news reports are that she was uncertain, but did ask if the child in the lineup that was recovered from Walters was the boy recovered. So seemed like she did identify her son, but seems to be some uncertainty there, or it was just written oddly in the newspapers back then and a little tough to ascertain.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That it was tough to ascertain, so it was a little bit tough to describe to the public what actually happened. But, I mean, how did this lineup come about? How do they find other children? Did they go into neighborhoods and ask if they wanted to be a part of this lineup? And then they tell the kids just don't say anything, line up? I mean, it seems a little bit excessive to try and cause the mom to trip up. I don't know. It felt like a trap to me. It felt like they were just setting her up to fail. I don't know. But a strange quote here, the boy recovered, that she did ask if the child in the lineup that was recovered from Walters was the boy recovered.
Right. And oddly, if the boy recognized Julia, he did not show it.
Well, the way they did it with Bobby's mom, Leslie, where she was allowed to bathe him and check him for distinguishing characteristics, they allowed Julia to undress the boy to help with identification as well. So this is the second time this boy's been undressed in front of or by a potential mother.
Yeah, once by his mother for sure, I think.
Yes.
Just not sure
regardless
which one.
of who he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same result. After that happened, just like with Leslie, Julia was much more certain that this child was her Bruce after she closely examined him.
Okay, so now we've got a bizarre custody battle here developing, and news reports faulted Julia for having 3 children out of wedlock, and they questioned her morality and therefore her credibility. And then she left for her home without her child.
Right. So public opinion, that news reporting, that sensationalizing everything has now put their hooks into Julia. So I'm wondering if that whole reporting on Julia, reporting on this story started earlier, and that's why Julia might have been set up to fail in the first place with this lineup of 5 boys, because they already had a preconceived notion that she wasn't credible or she wasn't a good person because she had 3 children out of wedlock.
Right, and she identified her son.
Yeah.
So, but she didn't get to, have her son. And unlike the situation with Mrs. Dunbar, she was able to keep her, or I guess the boy that she thought was her son or claimed was her son.
Right.
And it's really sad because Julia could not match the Dunbar's wealth and prominence in this custody battle.
Right. I think that's pretty telling right there.
Yeah. So they threw enough money at it to, sort of, I guess, bankrupt or starve Julia to the point where she had to let it go.
Yeah. Another alternative is that they paid her off too.
That's possible, I suppose. Yeah.
But the residents of Mississippi weren't going to give up this whole story without a fight. And William Cantwell Walters had stayed with several families in the area who wanted to make statements on his behalf. They wanted to defend him. And they wanted people to know that the boy had been with Walters since at least July.
So little Bruce had been with Walters for at least a month when Bruce was apparently identified or misidentified. And if that was true, it would make it impossible for Bruce to be Bobby Dunbar, because Bobby Dunbar hadn't even gone missing yet.
Exactly. Bobby Dunbar went missing a month later.
So these residents appealed to the governor of Mississippi to, put an end to these legal proceedings about William Walters. And they did not want him to be extradited to Louisiana. And the governor was open to hearing testimony from these people in making the decision to extradite, but eventually allowed Walters to be taken to Louisiana to be tried for kidnapping. I mean, at this point, it seems like this family kidnapped Bruce. Doesn't seem like William Walters kidnapped Bobby.
I know. And at this point in the story, I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that there is still one child who hasn't been accounted for. There's still one child who's missing.
Right. Yes. Very strange part of this. Yeah.
It's so wild to me. So crazy. And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
But in the meantime, the Dunbars, again, keep in mind their wealth, they did everything they could to make sure that everyone knew, that the world knew that the boy that they had was their boy, Bobby. News reports told stories of him remembering things. I don't know if it was suddenly, but it was enough where the news was alerted to the fact that, oh, Bobby remembered something new about this family. Other families recognizing him, there were reports on that. There was also reports that continued to absolutely destroy the reputation of William Walters and Julia Anderson, doing this whole public shaming, making sure that there was no chance that any of their testimony would be considered reliable. So they're already coming from like a place of disadvantage here. She's has children out of wedlock. He's found with the child. So it's very easy for them to be the victims of a tarnished reputation campaign. Old-fashioned smear campaign.
Yeah, for sure. And so in April of 1914, which is almost 2 years after Bobby went missing, a jury was seated for the kidnapping trial of William Walters, and Percy Dunbar testified as the first witness. On one of the days of the trial proceedings, it had to be adjourned early because there was such a mob of onlookers that the judge believed it would unduly impact the trial.
That's incredible. And opinions were divided if the boy was Bobby or Bruce, and if Walters was involved in the kidnapping at all. And that makes sense. I mean, you're going to pick a side when you're so caught up in something like this in your community. And unfortunately, he's eventually convicted. After that, he immediately appeals the decision. And in November of the same year, the Louisiana Supreme Court set aside the conviction and remanded it back to the original court for retrial. So now it's just going through the political red tape and bureaucracy.
And the original trial had cost the county so much that Walters was never retrialed, as it would have bankrupted the county.
That's another point that just blew my mind. Like, how much did the first trial cost? And they looked at it and they were like, this would just bankrupt us.
Yeah, it sounds like it must have gone on for a while. And so he was released. But the court of public opinion had convicted him, and that did follow him for the rest of his life.
What a way to live the rest of your life.
At least he got out, though. That was kind of the way I looked at that. Because that would have been a wrongful conviction, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much here that makes me scratch my head. There's so much here that could have been done to answer this, I feel like, a lot quicker. Like, I know the child is 4 years old, and I know we're talking about the early 1900s, but, like, kids do talk and form memories at 4 years old. And maybe it was the trauma of the situation where a child is being put between two families and talked about and knows that they're the center of attention, the spotlight's on them. So maybe it caused the child to not fully explain the situation. But I'm just like really confused why this wasn't figured out quicker. And where's the other child?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll get there, right? But this is a very strange part because the kid would know, right? Like the kid who was 4 at the time, kids at 4, they talk, they have their own thoughts, plenty of thoughts, in fact. I mean, unless Bobby was different and was quiet or something like that, or maybe like didn't know his mom very well, or here's one possibility, actually would have preferred a life with a more well-to-do family. I don't want to jump ahead, but a kid at 4, I doubt is thinking like that, though.
I know, and it being such a short period of time, it's not like this kid went and lived in luxury and was like, I can't go back. I mean, he's 4 years old. Yeah. Doesn't really have a frame of reference for a lot.
Right. Yeah. So Bobby Dunbar would continue to be raised by the Dunbars. However, life in the early years was far from idyllic, and Percy would run for political office and gain a reputation for infidelity, and Lessie would leave for Florida and file for divorce from Percy in 1927.
And we got a couple of photos here, thank you, Kathleen, of Lessie Dunbar with Bobby after the kidnapping, and Bobby looks like he's smiling. And Bobby looks happy. He doesn't look like he's distressed at all. And again, this is just one single frame out of thousands of moments that occurred here, but he doesn't look like an unhappy child. He looks healthy, is what I'm saying. There's also an undated photo of Percy, Alonzo, Bobby, and Leslie. And you kind of look to see a comparison here between the two children. But this is an undated photo, so this photo of Bobby could be the one in the other one, but they look identical.
They do look identical. I'm thinking it was probably post-disappearance, but I don't know. That's a good point. So then Percy passed away in 1931 at the age of 56 following years of ill health from a cardiac event. And little Bobby would grow up and marry and raise 4 children in Opelousas.
And Alonzo, his brother, did the same thing. So they kept the family in that community. Obviously, things there weren't so bad as far as the public opinion of them that they felt like they had to leave. They decided to raise a family.
Right. And Julia Anderson stayed in Poplarville, Mississippi. She married and had several more children and became a nurse and midwife for the community.
That's great.
She was surrounded by children her whole life.
Yep. Seems like she worked her way out of whatever court of public opinion had convicted her of being just a bad person. Good for her. And William Walters continued his life as a tinker and died in Pueblo, Colorado in 1945.
Right. Leslie remarried and lived until 1971. And this is really interesting. Sometime in the 1950s, Bobby Jr. would ask his dad if he thought he was Bobby Dunbar or not. And his father's answer was, quote, "I know who I am and I know who you are, and nothing else makes a difference," end quote.
I thought that was a really interesting moment, sort of a bittersweet moment between the father and the son. I appreciate the fact that Bobby Jr. was never kept in the dark and felt that he was in a healthy enough relationship with his father to ask that question. Because I was kind of expecting that the end of that piece of the story to end with Bobby ignoring his son or saying, stay out of, matters that you shouldn't be concerned with. But it seems like they've communicated this story to the family, and it's not dysfunctional in a way where Bobby Jr. would feel nervous about asking his dad. Maybe he was nervous, but the fact that he was able to ask that question just shows that maybe they had really good communication.
Yeah, good. I'm glad for that. But the quote is pretty vague. You would think he would. You would think he would say definitely, yes, definitely, or something vague, probably.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a little weird to me. Yeah.
It is weird, and this says it doesn't give us the exact date that Bobby Jr. asked him. So I don't know how old Bobby Jr. would have been, but he would have been into his adult years. So he would have been able to handle the answer no matter what, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And oddly, no one in the media seemed to ask if Bobby is Bobby, then where is Bruce?
Thank you.
The original child, Bruce. Yeah. That's something that you mentioned a few minutes ago. It's like there's still a missing child here, regardless of who this little, boy belongs to. But
I know there's a child who's still missing, unless one of the children didn't exist. But I'm sure Bobby and Bruce both existed. At the top of this document that Kathleen put together, she has 2 pictures. And on the left, we'll show this, is the boy who is believed to be Bobby Dunbar. And then on the right is a photo of Bobby Dunbar before he went missing. So on the left is the boy that could be Bruce, could be Bobby, but the boy that came into the picture after Bobby went missing. So Bobby's there on the right. I can't tell the difference. It looks like the boy on the left looks like a slightly thinner version.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the angles are kind of off and there's a bit of shading. I will say their hair and their complexion looks the same, but other than that, I really can't tell.
No, the ears are the same, like tapered. The chin is the same. The mouth kind of dips down the same way. The noses appear to be a little different, but it could be the shading. Yeah, part in the hair is the same. Eyebrows are the same. I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell. I'm not the mom. I'm not the dad.
Yeah, I mean, these photos are, over 100 years old, so it's the quality isn't great, but pretty good for being that old. But yeah, I would say you cannot tell from these photos that this is the same, different boy or not.
Did anyone look for the straw hat or blue rompers?
Good question. They really don't come up again.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
Bobby's children would also grow to have children, and Bobby Jr.'s daughter, Margaret, would receive a scrapbook from her father, which started the investigation anew in 1999. So more modern times, and she grew up hearing stories from her grandmother about the kidnapping, and in turn told those stories to her children.
This is really incredible. The interfamily mystery is something that is really truly fascinating to me, and she was fascinated by it as well. When you discover something about your family, especially when it's been told to you by other family members when you're old enough, and then they start telling you and passing down the stories, this just must have set her off. I, in a way, am very jealous that this happened to her, because it's a meaningful mystery for her family, and if she's able to get some answers here, I don't know if it would do I don't think it would do that much damage at this point, because they've all lived their lives. They've all made something of themselves. But what it would do is answer a lot of questions about where this other child is, if she continues this investigation. So it might bring some answers to other families who have been desperate for them. So she's fascinated by the story, fueled by the curiosity that these newspaper clippings have ignited in her, and she begins this investigation. Bobby had passed away in 1966 from a heart issue, so he wasn't there to protest or encourage her in her investigation. So she's going into this without any real restrictions from her family.
Yeah, and so she reached out to ancestors of both Julia Anderson and William Walters. And at first, she truly believed that the boy that had been recovered was Bobby Dunbar. However, after hearing stories from other families about how the loss, trial, and character assassination affected them, her position softened on the situation. And they actually believed that the Dunbars had kidnapped Julia's son, as much as the Dunbars believed Walters had kidnapped Bobby.
So what does that mean? Why would they... Then where's Bobby? Did Bobby drown? Did Bobby have some sort of deficiency that was going to cause him to lose the family's fortune, and they needed to find a child as that changeling concept where that child can come in and continue the lineage of this family because the other one isn't able to?
Yeah.
But we've had no reports that original Bobby was ill or afflicted with something that was going to prevent him from continuing the family's wealth or growing the family's wealth. Also, they just happened to find a child that was nearly identical. They must have been scouting for a child at that point, or...
Yeah, I'm not sure, because it was an unnamed witness, I guess, who spotted this boy, Bruce. But yeah, I agree. We're getting into really weird territory with all this. And there's just a little bit before the end of this story here. So apparently, even with what Bobby told his son in the 1950s about knowing who he was, Bobby, as an adult, had questions as well. Naturally, I would say. Margaret learned that at least 2 of Julia's children got visits from Bobby in the 1940s. Well, that's pretty interesting.
Okay. Yes, this is interesting.
So he's investigating his own lineage, his own life. Must have had some doubt for sure. Although the reports were that the kidnapping wasn't discussed at all. And it seemed as if he just wanted to check in on them.
What arrangement has been made here? Doesn't this feel very arranged? And in the 1940s, Bobby suddenly feels like he's able to check in on the children of the woman who at one point identified him as being her son.
Yeah, so his siblings or half
would
siblings
be his siblings. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say that there was some genuine curiosity there from Bobby, and for sure some doubt. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go to the family that I guess kidnapped you, right?
Yeah, right. Also interesting that they never discussed the kidnapping.
Yeah.
What else did they talk about?
Must have been the elephant in the room. I mean, really, yeah, must have been the elephant in the room. Like, it's very strange. Like, yeah, I guess how things are going. I don't know. He must have had some memories from way back, though, Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he didn't.
I don't know. Wow.
So Margaret also tracked down the children of William Walter's attorney, who still had the defense file from the trial. So that's pretty interesting. And the information in that file finally started to change Margaret's mind on what really happened in 1912. So in 2004, Margaret approached her dad about DNA testing, and he agreed to do it, and they were able to get one of Alonzo's sons to do it as well. So testing someone in Alonzo's line was important because he was a confirmed Dunbar, and the results, Lance, ripped the Dunbar family apart. Bobby Jr. was not related to the Dunbars, officially.
Yep. And I could hear our listeners as we were like halfway through this conversation. I could hear them saying, "What about DNA? What about DNA?" And yes, DNA once again is the ultimate truth teller here. Bobby Jr. was not related to the Dunbars.
Yeah, so I guess we can just call him Bruce now. So Bruce lived as Bobby for almost his entire life, but was never actually part of that family. So, okay, so back to the real Bobby, where is he? And there really wasn't much like as far as his disappearance, like how he went missing. A lot of times the circumstances of someone's disappearance will tell you a lot about where they might be. But in this story, there really just isn't too much to go on.
No, there isn't.
So Margaret would go on to write a book about the mystery called A Case for Solomon, Bobby Dunbar and the Kidnapping That Haunted a Nation. And she believes now that what most likely happened on August 23rd, 1912 was that Bobby fell into a swamp and was eaten by an alligator. And as to how the parents did or did not recognize their child or why they acted how they did at the time will also forever be a mystery. Certainly open for some conversation here.
I mean, that's just incredible to me.
Yeah, it is an insane story. And, it's like they lost their kid, so they kidnapped a kid, basically, is really ultimately what happened.
Or they just wanted, yeah, let's go through a scenario here.
Yeah, which is so weird because they accuse the person who was with the boy of kidnapping, so it's almost like this like direct gaslighting like approach, right? It's like, he kidnapped this kid. We don't kidnap, but really they kind of legally stole the kid. Right.
But aren't they gaslighting themselves too?
Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, the vagueness of, Bobby's fake dad, what he said would lead me to think that there was some doubt in his mind too. But I don't know if it's like so painful that you lost your son, and I'm not trying to blame them for his disappearance. I don't know how it happened. But the fact that he's gone from your family anymore is so traumatizing that, maybe you just accept that this kid who does look a lot like, your missing son, you can just accept that maybe it is, live like it is. And if he doesn't put up a stink, you just move on.
Wow. I mean, it's just remarkable to me that they managed to come into contact with a child that is almost identical to their son. And that was enough to make them believe that this was actually him. And then his real mother. I mean, Julia Anderson had to either be questioning herself so heavily, or maybe in some way she thought that it would be best for Bruce to live with the wealthy family and have a better life than what she might be able to provide.
That's interesting. I mean, she did let it go at some point. in the research, it seems to be because she didn't have the money to continue fighting this legal custody battle. But, you're right. At some point, she did let it go. So maybe that was some solace, I guess, for her in that very difficult decision.
Yeah, and it clearly affected the Dunbar family because they ended up splitting up. I don't think that the parents were 100% on the same page about Bobby. I'm sure one of them had a little bit more doubt than the other. It was probably, we joked about it being the elephant in the room when Bobby went to see his potential siblings, but I mean, that must have been just this toxic elephant in the room every single day. Every time they were together, Bobby is the topic of conversation. Bobby Bruce is the topic of conversation. And they probably on some level knew like this isn't him. But it could be him. But we can make new memories with this one, and we can pretend that it's him. And then you have to just deny the fact that, the actual Bobby is out there somewhere. Something happened to the real Bobby, the real person.
All right, Lance. So that is the story of Bobby Dunbar. Quite a mystery, and as we mentioned at the beginning, like kind of a psychological mystery on like how do these people kind of move forward with this? Do they either know that this person isn't their family, or do they not know? And either way, it's kind of compelling because I don't know. There's something going on in the family dynamic and in sort of the brains of these folks. Like, are they in denial or, a lot of questions.
A lot of questions. I like to think that it came about in this way. I like to think that the Dunbars, on some level, knew that this wasn't actually Bobby, and they provided some income for Julia, and she gave up the fight because she goes on to have several more children. She actually starts what it seems to be her life anew by becoming a midwife and making children her life. So it didn't destroy her, which makes me think that maybe the Dunbars did provide her with some financial assistance in sort of a unwritten exchange, an unwritten handshake saying, let this go and live your life. Maybe they even appealed to her a little bit on, the fact that their child might be dead. We lost our child. We can provide this child with a much better life than you can. Here's some financial aid. I mean, that's the best case scenario I can think of. Yeah,
and pretty sad if the real Bobby was actually eaten by an alligator. I mean, I think that stuff is pretty rare, but it can definitely still happen, and especially if it's a small child, you're more likely for that to happen. I guess it was a swampy area that they were in, so it's certainly a possibility. All right, well, thanks a lot for listening. We really appreciate it. Make sure to tell a friend, like, and subscribe, and you can leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and we'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, everybody.